My heart was like, greatest gift of Father. And I thought about the Father's role, and that was putting the fear of God in them. I used to hear my mother and them talking all the time, and it's like, put the fear of God in them. And the example of love and obedience to God, our sons and daughters, they need to see godly precepts lived out each day in our words and choices, since we are the first spiritual teachers and advisors they'll ever know. We're the first one that'll mold them, make them. We the first ones. So when I thought about that, I thought about love, leadership in the family, obedience, submitting to God, making Him first priority. And children need to see godly precepts. They need to walk, and they need to see it lived out each day in the words and the choices and decisions that we make. I mean, daily. And since we are first spiritual, that spiritual impact that we have on them, that natural impact, anything that we say, we're molding them. They're watching us, and they're like clay. And so you're molding them into who they will become, but what we say, what we do. And so in Deuteronomy 6 is where I wanted to start, in the first verse. And it's in the Old Testament. Okay? And it says, now this is the command, the statutes and the judgments, precepts, which the Lord God has commanded me to teach you, so that you might do or follow or obey them in the land which you are crossing over the Jordan to possess. Now this was given to the children of Israel. But every word from Genesis to Revelation is relevant in our lives. So we cannot take out the Old Testament and say it's just the New Testament we're following, when most of the Old Testament is reverberated all over the New Testament. So it's impossible to let it go, to not read the Old Testament and not read the New. So this is talking about the children of Israel, but it impacts us because it's a part of what He commanded us to do also. So now this is the command, the statutes and the judgments, precepts, which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, so that you might do or follow or obey them in the land which you are crossing over the Jordan to possess. Second verse, so that you and your sons and your grandsons may fear and worship the Lord your God with an awe-filled reverence and profound respect. That's what I was talking about when I said, put the fear of God in those children. And that's where in verse 2, it's saying, so that you and your son and your grandson may fear and worship the Lord your God with an awe-filled reverence and profound respect, to keep and actively do all His statutes and His commandments, which I am commanding you all the days of your life, so that your days may be prolonged. Therefore listen, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in numbers, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land. Now it says the phrase referring to the abundant fertility of the land of Canaan, which spilled milk, typically that of goats and sheep, was associated with the abundance. Honey referred mainly to syrup made from dates or grapes and was the epitome of sweetness. Bees, honey, was very rare and was considered the choicest of foods. So when he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind, and with, okay, let me go back up. I'm up here on the third verse. Yeah. It says, as the Lord the God of your fathers has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey. So that's what I was describing to you about what they were saying, flowing with milk and honey. It says, so hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one, the only God. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind, and with all your soul, with all your strength and entire being. These words which I am commanding you today shall be written on your heart and mind. You shall teach them, and this is the 7th verse that I said the fathers should really be impactful on their sons and daughters. You shall teach them diligently to your children. Hold up, because I'm going to explain it. Yeah, to your son. And it said sons. And I always say, why do they always mention sons? Well, sons pass on legacy. Sons pass on things. Okay, so let me go on. It says, you shall teach them diligently to your children, impressing God's precepts on their minds and penetrating their hearts with his truths, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up. I'm going to read 8 and 9. And you shall bind them as a sign of your hand forearm, and they shall be used as band frontals. And listen, back in the day, they called them parcelities. I think they call them parcelities. And this is originally a Greek word meaning safeguard. In Jewish tradition, they are also called tefillin and are understood to be small leather boxes tied to the forearm and to the top of the head with leather straps. And the boxes contain small parchment copies of the passage found here and 3 others. So they were so serious about it that they put those frontal and on their arms, their wrists, their forearms, and forehead. And he said, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Listen. Now, I can't not say this Hebrew word. So, it's misot, which is like tefillin, verse 8 and verse 8. And it also has a special significance in Jewish tradition. It's the singular misah. Is a piece of parchment on which is written this passage. And forgive me, anybody who is Jewish, how I butchered your words. Please forgive me. Parchments on which is written this passage in verse 6, 4 through 9, and 11, 13 through 21. The parchment is encased to protect it and is attached to right doorposts. So it's also attached to the doorpost. And by Jewish law, all rooms where people lived or slept, excluding bathrooms, are required to have those on the doorposts. Is that not something? And so they were required to put those on doorposts of your house. It was a law, and on your gates. So, and I'm not going to go down a little further yet, but I just wanted to say something to really even go even deeper, even in our times. You know, a lot of people don't understand how important it is in raising sons. You know, daughters, they go on to marry and they become wives. But sons are husbands. That means they're going to be leaders. And they're going to be some leaders in some capacity. So if they're going to be leaders, then each child is going to come in this world moldable. So mom and dad, you're the one that's going to mold. But dad, you're that molder. You're molding that mind. Whatever you do, that son looks up to you. He's looking at you. So I'm going to do what dad does. Whatever dad does, I'm going to do. So as we teach and are molding godly conduct, attitudes, and words and belief systems bent toward God can develop within them. You can start that before they go into those them years where, and that's really after the age when they get into the second, third grade. But when you get into those early years, when that mind is moldable, when you can get that mind to do this and do that, there's where they get to easily is molded and pliable. And it's like a sieve that filters everything coming into the mind. A child who has been prayed over and taught God's way is more likely to see the world from a biblical perspective and not from other worldly perspectives. If you teach your child, men of God, fathers, teaching your sons, it is important, because if you teach them, they know how to lead when they get older, even in their jobs, even as they go along with picking friends, even as they go on choosing to do right or wrong. This is begun early years when they watch what fathers do, mainly sons. And if they don't have fathers in their lives, that's not critical. That's hard. It's not good. But when fathers are absent, hopefully some other father figure can come in and bring up that child and help that child. But if a father is in that life of the child, you are helping to mold that brain. Because even if you go to church and you take those children to church, they may go to church maybe every Sunday, but some of them may go every other Sunday, some one Sunday, just depending on when the parents go. But when those children go to church, they're molded. But the main time they spend with their parents is when they're the most molded, because those early years is when mom and dad are the ones that are molding the most. They're the counselors, they're the advisors, they're the molders, they're the teachers. And they teach a belief system. What are you teaching your sons and daughters? But when you have a son and he's programmed by the secular culture or another religion with views life through a distorted lens, you're going to have a problem. And that child is not, especially one, if you have a child who grows up, doesn't know how to control his temper, doesn't know how to deal with money, doesn't know how to deal with life itself, but then he learns from the outside world. And the outside world can be truly cruel. I don't need to tell you about outside world. Music, gangs, all types of things that can bring children and pull them out and have them distorted by the distorted lens and cultures, especially of today's times, with in technology increasing the way it is and the world growing evil and more evil every day. You must know that your child, when he walks out your house after you've done raising him or her, that you've done all that you know how to do, so that they have the weapons and they have the wherewithal and they have the mind to know how to go into this world. They can't take your faith, but if you build a faith inside of them, and I'll tell you how, and I'm using this related to Timothy. And I will go with, if you would go with me to 2 Timothy the first chapter, and I will also bring scripture into this. Paul was a big influence on Timothy's life. Paul was more like a father figure, because I didn't hear much about Timothy's life, and I kept hearing Paul as the most influence on Timothy. But Paul said this in 2 Timothy, second epistle of Paul, Apostle Paul, and that's the 2 Timothy chapter 1. Okay? It says, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, by the will of God, according to the promise of life,